We're here today to talk with retired District Judge Rozier E. Sanchez. Judge Sanchez has been retired for, I believe, about 17 or 18 years now, and I'd like to visit with him about his career. Judge, thank you very much for agreeing to present your oral history for the State Bar. It's a great project, and we certainly are pleased to have you as a participant.
I appreciate that opportunity very much. Thank you.
Judge, could you tell us a little bit about your early life? Is there anything in your childhood or your early adolescence that influenced the direction of your life?
You have to realize my early life was in Socorro, New Mexico. Population a little bit less than 4,000 people, and during the Depression. So there was really no opportunity to look to the future for purposes of employment professionally, and so on. It was a matter of sustenance. But there were two or three things that go to your question. One of them, my dad was a very strong proponent of education. He talked to us, three boys, about the need, the necessity of educating, and he would walk us through the park occasionally, and he would point out to the people who were, the men who were digging ditches, and he said, now that's the alternative to no education. If you wanted to dig ditches, why then that's your choice. Well, it didn't mean too much to me at that particular time, and there were a lot of things that seemed to be more important, and that was my friends who were a little bit older than I was, and my friends, I think, was the turning point in the question that you asked. I attended the Catholic school with the nuns, and most of my friends, older, had attended the public schools. And come one, it was a feast day. It was George Washington's Day, and the public schools had off, and the Catholic school did not celebrate George Washington's Day. So I was supposed to go to school. But my friends came up the day before and said, let's go fishing. And I said, I can't. I got to go to school. And they said, why don't you just take your fishing stuff and hide it? And then we will pick you up in the morning. We'll walk on down to the ditch, and nobody will know. I said, hey, that sounds pretty good. So I did. I took my stuff out, and I hid it. And we walked about 1.5 miles to this drain, and it was cold out there. And there was a little bluff, and then the water was down here. Well, I jumped down off that bluff to a narrow ledge, and I just fell into the water. And I didn't realize I had fallen into the water until and it was deep. It was about 10 feet deep. And I realized I was on the bottom, and I didn't know how to swim. But I did come up, and I lost a shoe, and when the kids there saw me, they panicked and they ran. And I was by myself, and I got out, and I went home, and all of a sudden it just dawned on me, my father was right. So at that particular point, I took the direction that you were just talking about, and I began to work towards a better type of life, an educated life.
You went to school in Socorro?
I went to a grade school and 1 year of high school in Socorro, yes,
And where did you go to undergraduate school?
Undergraduate school was in college. I attended Loyola University in Los Angeles.
How about law school?
Law school was Georgetown in Washington, D.C.
Is there anything about your childhood or your early adolescence that influenced your decision to practice law or the area of law in which you were involved before you were appointed?
You know,
pointed
it's
to the bench.
almost the same area that I was just discussing, except this, that when I was reached the 8th grade, I was the principal of the school came to me and said that she wanted me to be what the nuns did every year. They had an operetta of some kind, some type of presentation where all of the classes participated. They sang and did things like this for the parents. And they were going to this year put on a minstrel show, of all things, the nuns. And they asked me to be the interlocutor. And I said, I don't want to be the interlocutor. I don't know anything about it. And they talked me into doing it. And then when she was convinced that I was going to do it, then she takes out this transcript. This transcript is about 2 inches. And she says, now you've got to memorize this. and the program starts in about 3 weeks. So I said, holy cow. If I would have known that, I wouldn't have said yes. But anyway, I did. And I spent just hours, and I memorized the whole thing, and then I threw a few things into my own. So we had a very, very successful program. And then after that program, there was a gentleman who had come up to me, and he was the father of an individual whom I was always fighting with. We were just back and forth, we were fighting. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, that was a very good program, and he said, you are going to be a lawyer. That's what he said. Well, my dad wasn't a lawyer yet, and it wasn't that, it didn't mean too much to me, but then that's something that I carried to this day. I remember what that man told me, and it made a tremendous impression on me. And it was a guidance to go into law school, and I used it.
Now, you weren't the only lawyer in your family, correct?
My dad.
And how did your father come to practice law?
My dad was a civil engineer. He had attended the School of Mines in Socorro, and he could not go to law school. It was too expensive for him to attend law school. But he had a lifelong dream of becoming a lawyer. And he took out a correspondence course, LaSalle correspondence course. And he had books. I remember all those things. And every single night after he played with us and talked with us, he went. And he wouldn't go to bed before 2 o'clock every morning. And he studied and studied. And then ultimately he passed the bar. And he passed the bar the same year, a little bit later than this program that I was telling you about at the end of the school year. And that's when he started to practice law.
Where did he practice law?
In Socorro. His legal work really complemented his engineering, because he was a geologist, and he was a mining engineer. He was a civil engineer. And then when he became a lawyer, well, then he did the legal work in those particular fields as well. So he was well-rounded in that area.
And how old were you when he was practicing law?
I was, I guess, in the 8th grade when he first started.
Well, now you indicated that you went to Loyola for law school. When did you do that?
Well, that was 4 years later, but then I had attended the first year. When I left the grammar school, I attended the first year in Socorro High School, and then we had relatives in Phoenix, and my older brother and I attended St. Mary's High School in Phoenix, Arizona. And there we had, especially in my case, I had some wonderful, wonderful help and guidance with reference to the direction going into law school. at least into college. One teacher, Father McLaughlin, he taught English. He recognized my leadership abilities, and he did everything that he could to get me to talk. And I talked to different groups, and he would select a group and tell me, "This is your topic." I didn't know anything about the topic, and he says, "Well, you have to figure out what it is." So I did, and I had to. He helped me, and so I had to learn how to speak, and he corrected me, and he guided me.
Is this in high school?
This is in high school.
Wow.
This
Okay.
is in high school, and then I had a good counselor in high school, and my original thought was that I wanted to go into engineering. And the counselor told me, he said, no. He said, your qualifications are much heavier on the legal side than they are on the other side. And I think they would be much better if you went into law. And this is what he was suggesting, and it was a good idea. And it was a good idea, which I did.
So, your counselor in high school was pointing the direction for you to get into law at a later time.
Yes, he was.
Okay. And when you went out to Loyola, were there teachers out there that were instrumental in your decision to continue in law?
Yes, kind of indirectly. I majored in political science, and one of the courses that I think was the final pointer was international law, and it was a series of cases that had occurred in the international field, and this professor, Dr. Chan, had discussed those, and he went through the legal process of each of those particular cases, and I had just a wonderful time, and I thought that was great, and so I was formulating a good direction towards law school, and then one of the teachers there, Mr. Sullivan, he was a Jesuit, and he called me to a side, and he was talking about the need for philosophy. And he said this philosophy is a good thinking course, and you must have theology or philosophy in every single semester that you take. And he told me to do that because it was going to help me as an individual in my thinking process. So I did, and I thank him for that, because it gave me a good competitive edge for purposes of thinking. That's what that was. So I did have some basis for a desire to go into law school when I was in college.
Other than those individuals and your father, are there any professors or other role models who inspired your educational and your professional choices?
No, I think that's those few were the ones that really showed it. I became involved in international relations organizations, and I was president of the International Relations Club in Loyola University, and there was another professor, a Spanish professor, who had encouraged me to pursue that, and he showed me a program of a conference that was going to be held in Fremont, Nebraska, on international relations, and it was sponsored by the Carnegie Endowment for the International Peace. And he said, I would look into going to that if I were you. And so I got permission from the school, and we went to that program. And I was elected vice president of this national organization, and believe it or not, Victoria was there, and she was elected secretary. That's how we met. So I met my wife, and then we had several meetings, and the big meeting was in New York City that following spring. There was a contingent that was trying to redirect the philosophy of this particular program, and I had to conduct the meeting, and there were about 250, 300 people out there, and there was a lot of for and a lot of them against, and I managed it, and I was just a senior in college, and I managed it, and after I finished that, I told myself, you know, that's an accomplishment. Not a big accomplishment for the community, but it was an accomplishment for me. And I began to more materialize then a thought that I think that I could handle law school as well. So I did.
And did you work when you were in college outside of law at all?
When I was in college,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I would come back from Loyola University in Los Angeles to Socorro, and I had summer jobs, but there was nothing that was really material towards the legal field.
You had your father, I believe, indicated, or you told me that your father was an engineer as well as a lawyer, and your early career in law dealt with natural resources as well, did it not?
Yes, it did.
Was that an impact on you, your father's experience?
I spent hours in my dad's office. I enjoyed reading those cases, and then the geology aspect of it I did not understand very well, but it was there, but I did read those cases, and then I would do mapping and stuff like that on his tables, and those are the things that I would do, and there was nothing really that was directing me yet at that time to law school.
Did you go directly from undergraduate school to law school?
No, I went into the Air Force.
And what did you do in the Air Force?
I was a navigator in the Air Force for 3 years, and when I finished the Air Force, I went into law school. But then I had some very harrowing experiences. We were flying both the B-25s, training aircraft for pursuit airplanes. And I became an instructor, and I was using the B-25 to teach students how to handle pursuit aircraft. And then when they finished the B-25, then we went into the F-89. The F-89 was a jet aircraft, and so it was nice. It was good, and I liked flying so much that when I was getting ready to leave the Air Force, there was a thought in my mind that maybe I don't want to leave the Air Force. I think I wanted to continue to fly. And I said, no, my mind is made up, and so I went to law school. Georgetown. I had not known much about Georgetown. It was just a school as far as I was concerned. And then someone had told me, said, you plan to go to law school, why don't you go to Georgetown? I said, why? Well, they have an acceleration program, and you can finish law school in 2 years instead of 3 years. And I'll look into it. So this was only 3 months before I got out of law school, out of the Air Force. I called Georgetown, and they said, well, where did you go to school? your college? I said, I went to Loyola University in Los Angeles. And it says, fine. Why don't you just have them send us a transcript? I said, okay, well, what about my entrance exam? We don't need that. All we want to know is your grades. So I did. I had him sent. And then about a week later, she calls and she says, we've accepted you. And I said, that's fine. So, okay. So I went immediately from the Air Force into law school.
And did you go through the accelerated program?
2 accelerated programs. I still had the strong desire to go into international law. And I finished my regular law degree, and then I took a second degree in international law. And because I was going to stay in Washington and I was going to practice international law, that's what I was going to do. And then halfway through my program, which was also accelerated, I would go down and visit some of these firms that did a lot of work in international law, like Dean Acheson and so on. And I talked to many of the young lawyers. Well, not so much young. I'd been there 10, 12, 14 years, and they were put back in just rooms for purposes of research in the library. And they said, we've never seen a courtroom. We don't know what a courtroom looks like. And I began to worry. And I said, well, the excitement of going into international law is kind of fading, because if I'm just going to go in and sit in the library all my life, I don't want to do that. So I got my degree. It was too late to stop, so I did get my degree in international law. And then I came out here, and I opened my office.
Well, you indicate that you were interested in going into the courtroom. How did you develop an interest in going to court?
I think that the interest, we didn't have TV, we didn't have the movies, we didn't except with books and things like that. But then one thing that really directed me there was the cases in international law. And I had read many of those cases and much of the transcript. And I said, hey, this is exciting. It was a different type of, it was international law, but it was in the maritime field in the federal courts. And I couldn't make that distinction. I thought that there was a different bar for that, and there wasn't. And so I knew that there was something exciting about being in a courtroom. And then I had seen, not too many times, I'd seen my dad 2 or 3 times in the courtroom, and I could see the picture of what was happening. And there was a demand on your ability to convince. And I said, I want to develop that.
You saw your father in the courtroom?
A couple of times, yeah.
Who was the judge down in Socorro in those days?
Garnet Burks, the
Senior.
older man. Garnet Burks.
When you were in law school, did you work as a clerk in any firm that gave you access to the courtroom?
The Georgetown Law Center had a wonderful program, 2 of them. One of them was the White Law Club, and it was a very popular club. I joined it, and I became president of the White Law Club, and we got lawyers in from the community to come in and talk to us. Well, we would go down and we would see certain things in the courtroom down there through the law club. That was one thing. And then the second phase was they had a lawyer referral service, assistance service, and they would assign an attorney or a case to us from an attorney from downtown, and we would work with them. And there were 3 or 4 cases that I had in law school, in which I would do research, and I would sit in the courtroom, and I would listen and talk to the lawyer, and he would tell me what and so on. So I had that type of experience.
Did you have a similar opportunity in the international law degree?
No, absolutely not. It was a disappointment.
And did you do these successively, or the 2 degrees successively?
Immediately.
Okay.
As soon as I finished my LLB degree, I went in on the international law, and I had a wonderful professor, 2 or 3 professors, but one of them was just outstanding, and he knew all those phases. He practiced, and I thought that's something I could do, but you just don't. It's not like going into a courtroom over here and saying, I want to become a lawyer. You just don't do that in the international field. It's just not that easy. So I said I didn't want to wait.
What year did you graduate from Georgetown?
I guess it was 1960.
And what was your next step then? You took the degree in international law the next year?
No. I left at that time with the 2 degrees in 1960,
Okay.
and I came down here.
You took the bar then in New Mexico in 1960?
February 1960.
Tell us about the bar exam in 1960.
It was 3 days, and fortunately, when I took the bar, it was an off year. The big time, it was always the end of the school year in June, but this was in the end of the winter season, so I took it in February, and there were only 12, maybe 14, who took the bar with me. Leroy Hansen, Judge Hansen, was one of them who also took the bar with me.
So we have 2 judges out of that class of 14
2 of
lawyers
them.
at least. After you took the bar, where did you first practice?
Well, I was very, very fortunate in so many ways. I don't know how, but people walked into the office 2 or 3 times because I hung up my own shingle. I didn't associate with anybody other than just renting office space, and I had two people who came in, they were minor matters, they weren't accidents of any kind, and they were satisfied with my work, and they told somebody else, and then I began to build up a little practice. But it was very slow. It was a very slow way of doing it, and I was wondering if I was ever going to make it, because the money, I was spending money faster than I was making it. And then I had joined the Air Force Reserve here in Albuquerque, and one of the members of the reserve was Les Williams. Les Williams was an assistant district attorney. In fact, he was chief assistant district attorney over several district attorneys. And he came to me one day and he said, you know, Alexander Cerise, the district attorney, is looking for somebody to do one particular thing. He said, I'd like you to go down and talk to him. So I did. I went down and talked to Alexander Cerise. And Alexander Cerise was initiating a program for the hospitalization of the mentally ill. And there was, He says, I'll hire you to do that. It's part-time, it's civil. You don't have to to give up any type of your practice. I didn't have much practice anyway, and I said, "Oh, you bet, I'll do it." So I took it, and it was very, very nice. So I became very close associated with Alexander Therese and with Les Williams, and then that was an economic help in having that particular job, and then my practice began to swell from there.
How did your practice evolve from there besides just swelling?
Well, I was fortunate to come down to Socorro periodically. My dad was failing in his health, and he couldn't do all the cases that he had in his inventory, and he asked me to do them for him, which I did, and there were several cases, and one of them was a water rights case. I didn't know anything about water rights at all, and but then this client needed to sell his water to somebody, and the state engineer was refusing, and I researched, and then I went through a long process, a hearing process, but I won it, and it was a big fee because he was selling that water for just an awful lot of money, and so he gave me much more than what I had asked for.
In those days, were lawyers billing by the hour, or they were billing by the case? How was that arrangement handled in a case like that?
With me, in all of my cases, I kept hourly time, but then I would send a bill at the end of the case, and they weren't. It wasn't too much because the case didn't involve an awful lot. It wasn't very time consuming. The one that was the biggest time consumer was the water rights case.
When you started practice, you said you hung up your shingle. Were you sharing space with other lawyers?
With Gene Cleakin and William Bingham, and they were longtime lawyers, and I just rented space from them. Every once in a while, Gene Cleakin would have a conflict, or would have difficulty, was out of town, and he asked me to handle some of his cases. I would do that. Bill Bingham did the same thing. So they did provide some type of help that way, but then it was my baby. I was going to win or going to lose because I wasn't hired by anybody with the exception of the district attorney.
So you were working in Socorro and in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
How big or how large was the bench at that point in time here in Albuquerque?
Oh, let's see. I think at one time, I recall it throughout the state of New Mexico, I believe there were close to 1,000 lawyers. And in the city of Albuquerque, the metropolitan area in Albuquerque, it was about 400. And
How many judges were there?
We had 4 judges in the district court, and then we had a 5th one that was appointed. So there were 5 judges.
Do you remember who they were?
Judge Larzolo was the 5th one. He was a judge that was supposed to have sat in Valencia County, but then once he was appointed, he says, "I'm not going to Valencia County," so he stayed up here. And then Judge Tackett and Judge Reedy and Judge McManus and Judge McPherson and Judge Swope. Those were the judges that were practicing at that time.
And did the Second Judicial District at that time encompass Sandoval and Valencia counties?
Up until the time that I was appointed, when I was practicing law, there were 3 counties, Valencia, Sandoval, and Bernalillo County. That was in this district. And then later on, when I was appointed in 1960, then the legislature had cut it, and there was just Bernalillo County as the Second Judicial District. But then I would have to go to Bernalillo. I would have to go to Los Lunas to try cases, yeah.
Other than what you've discussed with us so far, are there any other particularly influential persons that you can think of in your career?
I think that perhaps the 2 most influential were both Alexander Cerise and Les Williams. They were nice friends, but also they're very constructive. And one of the things that Alexander Cerise did, he gave me this program that really established self-confidence in the work that I was going to be doing. And he says that look, we have to reorganize a system of the hospitalization of the mentally ill, and it's been failing. And I want you to redo it. So I had to work on it, and I developed it. He always complimented me on what I was doing, and it was accepted. And then but he died. He died in the middle of his practice.
Let me ask you, what did you do to develop that field of law that he'd asked you to work in?
And which, you mean the mentally ill?
Yes.
Well, I started that at the time in 1960, about 1961, when I was appointed assistant district attorney, and I began to develop that. And what it amounted to ultimately was to coordinate the work at the mental health center and the district court. And I had so much difficulty because the judges really didn't want to bother with it. They figured that it was just something that it was not criminal, it was not civil, it was not the typical type case, and they came up only periodically, and they just didn't want to bother. And I tried very, very hard to do this. When I was handling them, the only way that we could get those who were to have a hearing mentally ill from the hospital to the courthouse for the hearing was with the sheriff. And their policy was that we go to the hospital, we handcuff the patient, we put them in the car, and we bring them to the courthouse. And we sit them in the courthouse along with those other people who are being charged with crimes and so on. And there was a mixture. And I would go to the judges, and I would say, can't we do something different? I proposed some plans to them, and they wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't listen to me. And then later on, when I became a judge, when they appointed me as district judge, the first thing that I did, was to march down to the county commission's office and to tell them that we need to change this, and I wanted their cooperation. And they did. So we set up a hearing room at the hospital. We had a special master appointed to hear them, and they report back to the district court. And we didn't have those people taken in handcuffs. And that was very, it was just an insulting thing to see that happen. So we did that.
Are there any cases that stand out in your mind other than, you talked about that water rights case. What other cases that you were involved with are memorable to you?
There's several.
As a lawyer.
As a lawyer, no, I don't guess so. They were all cases, and I don't think that there was any particular case that stood out. The water rights case was the case. I had some cases in reserve, but they weren't. Oh, there was one case. There was one case when I was practicing law, and it was a water rights case, but it didn't develop that way. As you know, in the state of New Mexico, these water districts, they have a mayordomo, and the mayordomo is the one who is to clean the ditch and to bring the water in and to parcel out the water to the people who are going to use it. And down in Monticello, which is just not too far from Hot Springs, they had that water district, and there was a big blowout between the water users and the board and so on, and somebody was shot and killed. And Garnet Burks, who was the judge, said that he was going to handle only one phase of it. He was going to handle the criminal phase, and he was going to ask the Supreme Court to appoint a judge for the civil. They filed a civil action for failure to provide water and so on. So who was appointed? It was H. Vern Payne. H. Vern Payne from Deming at that time. And he came up, and he was the judge, and we heard that case. And that was a situation in which both sides of that lawsuit were bitter enemies, and they came to the courthouse armed. And so Victoria had taken me down, she and the kids, so I says, look, you drop me off at the courthouse and you go down to the Elephant Butte and you stay there because I don't want you up here. Something's going to happen. And had the sheriff go through each one of those individuals and check their guns, and they were guns. They were guns. And then as we were doing the case, if I would make an objection and if it was sustained by the judge, then that group of people would go, and then if the other side would make an objection and it was sustained, that group would applaud. And Judge Payne had some difficulty in trying to keep those people apart like that. That was a very interesting case.
Okay, let's take a little bit of a break here, shall we? You told me something once. Judge, are there any other cases that you can recall that come to mind as memorable cases to you as a lawyer?
And I think I'm satisfied with what I've told you regarding cases as a lawyer. Oh, there was the one that the water rights case. And I'll tell you about that. It was a very interesting conclusion, and I used that many times when I talk to law students. And essentially, the point that I wanted to tell the lawyers or the law students is that you never ask a question on cross-examination unless you know what the answer is. Otherwise, you get into trouble. And this is a perfect situation. I was trying to prove to the state engineer that this piece of land had been irrigated uh, through an irrigation ditch before 1907. And we had our hearing. And one of the first witness I put on was a 92-year-old man, and he was terribly impeached by the attorney on the other side. Almost made fun of him because of his age, that he couldn't remember an awful lot, and it kind of provoked me the way that it was being done. Then I called my next witness, and he was about 65, 60 years old, something like that. And then he said, yes, I remember that this piece of land was irrigated by a irrigation ditch. And I remember perfectly well that it was done by an irrigation ditch. And I'm positive it was, something like that. And then on cross-examination, and I didn't ask him why, he knew. I was going to let the other attorney ask him that question. And then the other attorney began by saying, well, you were only 5 years old at that time, weren't you? I said, yeah. Well, how were you so positive that this land was irrigated by a ditch? And he looked at that lawyer for about 10 seconds. And he says, Mr. So-and-so, I think this is a date, I'm not sure, on July 18th, 1905, the building that was just described burned to the ground. My father and my brother died in that fire. And I remember the men running to the irrigation ditch with pails, bringing water to try to put it on the fire. That's how come I'm positive. Well, I got my water. But by the same token, it was a very, very good example to the law students.
Judge, when did you come to the bench?
In 1973.
Were you elected or appointed?
I was appointed by Governor Bruce King.
Okay. What had you been doing as a lawyer immediately prior to your appointment?
Well, trying to practice law, and I was doing the mentally ill, and then I was doing other cases. I had a slew of cases. I couldn't handle accident cases, automobile accident cases, because there was a prohibition in the statute that an assistant district attorney could not handle those. So I couldn't handle those, but I could handle everything else, and I did. And I made a lot of wills, and I did some litigation. I had some interesting field of litigation. It was nice.
When you were appointed, Governor King appointed you?
Yes.
What number of judges were there on the bench when you were appointed? Do you remember?
I think I was number 20 or 21. So there must have been 19 or 18 judges on the bench already.
And how long did you serve on the bench?
20 years.
Can you recount any significant cases at this time that you were involved with as a judge?
There are several that stand out pretty well. One of them was there was a popular atheist, Murray, had come to town for whatever reason, and there was some disgruntled individual had thrown a pie in her face, and he was promptly arrested, and he was charged with battery. He went to before a metropolitan court judge and was found guilty. And then he appealed it to the district court, and it was in my court. And there was nothing to it. It was just an improper thing to do, and I affirmed below, but I made a statement. I said that I think that I found the statement. I cannot accept your argument that any person who is aggrieved by another's personal philosophy can attempt to justify the use of violence. And that went into the paper. And the courtroom was crowded because there were so many of the people who just did not like the atheist, and they wanted her to be leave or something or other, and they were satisfied that they got the pie thrown in the face. And so I affirmed it, and then I had to have the sheriff lock everyone in the courtroom while I permitted she and her entourage to leave the courtroom and to get out into the street, because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I did, and that was to me one of the memorable type cases. Later that afternoon, my bailiff comes over and he says, "Judge, look what I found," and there was a crushed apple right under the bench. Somebody, I guess, had thrown an apple. Was just mad because I didn't do for them what. And then, so in the paper the next day, it says, "Archbishop's brother supports atheist." That was the headline. I said, well, okay, that's the way it goes.
Any other cases that you can recall that are memorable to you?
In a way, yes. And not all of these cases were so serious. There was a little bit of levity in some of the cases, and one of the cases was like this. The district attorney was prosecuting a individual for distribution of drugs, and the attorney who was representing the defendant had no mercy on the witness who were testifying. I had to tell the jury, I'd tell the attorney once in a while to slow down and not be so mean. And he, when he was on the podium, he had two ballpoint pens, and he would go pop, 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 pop. You could hear him all over the courtroom. This pop, 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 pop. And for every single witness that he was questioning. And then the state rested. The defense put on one witness, and the state called a rebuttal witness. Now, I did not know where this rebuttal witness was coming from, but then she was coming from the labor unit at the hospital. She was in the process of having a baby, and they brought her, and I saw her in the edge of the courtroom, and I couldn't believe that was the witness. And she had this terrible duck waddle because she was so big, and I thought she was going to have her baby there. I says, well, she's here. And David, my bailiff, couldn't get her on the witness stand. We had to put a chair in the middle of the room for her to sit down, and she sat down there, and then I called my secretary, and I says, the moment she sneezes, you call 911. This is, I don't want something happening in the courtroom. And she didn't do that. Anyway, one question was asked, and the defense then walks up. And the entirety of the jury knew what he was going to do. And he had his poppers. He looks at that woman for about 20 seconds, and he goes, pop, 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 pop. I looked at the jury, and I said, "What's this?" And then he says, "No questions." And when he said no questions, every single juror, you could hear it go, whoosh. You know, they just realized something was. And there was another one. It was kind of funny, and I'll always remember this. It was a paternity case, and this lady had a very young lawyer, inexperienced lawyer, and he had called the purported father on the to the stand, and then he couldn't get the question out. He would say, "Did you? Have you? How many?" And he just putzing around like that. And then I says, "Sir," I says, "why don't you please ask questions about sex in the right way?" And then he says, "I'm sorry, sir." Then he looks at that fellow and he says, "Sir, did you have sex with my client in the right way?" And that was sort of a very, very funny thing that occurred. Anyway, that was one of the very meaningful decisions that I made in the not too distant past was now as Judge Pro Tem. After I retired from the bench, I spent 8 years as Judge Pro Tem in the northwestern part of the state adjudicating water rights, and we had this one case. It was I just lost my thought a moment. I'll come back to it. I get a terrible pain down here.
Let me ask you a question while you're thinking of that. Can you tell me, when you were appointed, did you have to run in a general election following your appointment?
Yes, I did, but I never had any opposition.
Do you have any other members of your family that have been involved in politics in New Mexico?
No, my dad served as assistant district attorney in Socorro County for several years, but outside of that, there was no politics. I'm the only one who was involved in politics.
Didn't you have a relative who was Secretary of State at one point?
Oh, go back the other way. That was very interesting. I'm glad you asked. Jenny Fortune, an aunt of mine, she was elected Secretary of State in 1928 and 29, and she ran against a Republican male, and her theme was to get the women vote. And she announced that if I am elected, every Secretary of State in the future is going to be a woman. If I'm defeated, every single Secretary of State is going to be a man. Well, she won, and true enough, it was prophetic. Every one of those persons
Since then, have been women since her election.
Have been women. It sure was, yeah.
Are there any cases other than what you've talked about, or attorneys of particular note that you recall, or attorneys' performances in the courtroom other than the one attorney that you mentioned?
I think that as a judge, I had always learned that I don't and cannot really associate one over another by way of attorneys. I can evaluate them to some degree, but then I have to keep distance, and I respect all of them, who respect the system, and I had no particular problem with that.
Can you tell me of any particular events during cases, other than the ones that you've recounted, that some humor came about as a result of a trial that was going on in your courtroom?
Well, probably I don't know much more about the humor. Those two instances are the things that stand out, and it was kind of funny at the time. I don't know if it was funny, but it occurred that way. And I think that many of my decisions of memory have occurred in water rights, in the water rights area. And I put in, established quite an expertise in water rights. And this one case that I'm referring to, and I passed upon it, and it was a demand by the State Land Commission for water. And if they would have won this case, they would have been entitled perhaps to water in all of the districts throughout the state, and there would have been a tremendous loss. Anyway, I passed against the State Land Commission, and that was approved by the Court of Appeals, by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court accepted cert, and then they wrote an opinion on it, and then I don't know what happened beyond that. Somebody said that it had gone to the Supreme Court of the United States, but I'm not sure. Anyway, that was a real marked case as far as I was concerned. It was a very important case.
Well, can you tell me, during your career, what are some of the events that you're most proud of as having been a judge in New Mexico, and events that transpired during your career?
There are two things that I've been very proud of, and one of them was with the mentally ill. When I was with the district attorney's office, I had noted that there were so many motions filed by the defense attorneys to determine competency to stand trial. Now, many of those were dilatory. Many of them were valid, and they were very time-consuming. It took just an awful lot, and very expensive, because you had to go out and get a doctor, and you had to pay the doctor, and then you had to do it when the doctor was available, and so on. And all of this caused a loss. And I had approached the court administrator, and I asked for his cooperation in trying to establish, to obtain funds, federal funds, to with a court clinic. And that court clinic would be located in the courthouse, right with the court. And any time that one of these motions were filed, it would go right to the court, right to that court clinic, and they would take care of it. They would have the hearing, and all would be done within a week. And it was very successful. We did get the money, and we moved very, very well. Then we began to run out of cases because no longer was it necessary for all these lawyers to file those things, and I was afraid we were going to lose the court clinic. So I got two doctors to experiment with two of my real bad divorce cases. And they worked on these divorce cases for a couple of weeks, and they were able to get them settled. And then that told me that I could possibly use that court clinic for domestic relations and child evaluation and so on. So I did. And then I had gone to the legislature, and I was asking the legislature for funding for 2 judges so that we could have two domestic relation judges. And they were a little bit skeptical, because why should Bernalillo County have all this benefit and then the other counties not? Well, I told them that we were assuring them that we had invited the districts throughout all the districts throughout the state, that they could utilize the court clinic as well. And so they were satisfied, and they provided the money. And then we had two judges, and the court clinic was established. And it's been a very successful program over the years, and I was very, very happy with that. That's one of the jewels in my mind. The second one is the Judicial Education Center, and that was a little more difficult to do, but I was determined that we had to work it out. I sat on the Judicial Standards Commission, and sitting on the Judicial Standards Commission, I came to realize that most of the judges in the inferior courts were violating these rules not because of an intention on their part, but because of ignorance. They did not know how to be a judge. That was the big problem. And I went to the Supreme Court and asked the Supreme Court if they wouldn't support me in asking the legislature for funds to establish some type of an education center. And I was blasted out of the office. They said, we can't do it. It's just the money has to be used for the courts, not for an education center. About that time, the administrative office of the court was invited to attend a conference, a leadership conference in North Carolina, Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and they were representatives from colleges throughout the country, and I was asked to go from the state, so I did. And when I was there, part of the project was to draw up a plan for judicial education in your state, or your district, whatever it was. So I did. I drew it up, and it was very, very, very comprehensive. That's what we have now. And the doctor in charge of the program said that that's a little bit too much, don't you think? And I said, no, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. So he let it go. I was talking with a woman who heard me, and she was from the state, it's a federal unit that provided funding for judicial education. And she said, we have money. It's issued on a competitive basis, and we can give you a grant so I got a judge from Washington State who knew about grants, and he helped me to draw up this plan with the consent of the Supreme Court, and we got it. And I think it was $250,000 for that first year. So we put it into effect, and Justice Sosa was very pleased with it. Where I ran into difficulty was with some of the judges did not want it at the law school. I wanted it at the law school because that's the cradle for education, is the school. And I had to fight that, and finally I was able to win it. And thanks to Justice Sosa. And Justice Sosa persuaded them, and we got the Judicial Education Center. Now we have it today. And that has been a program which has really been recognized by state justice institutes, and education centers throughout the country. What we have here, and it's not so much what's been recognized, but the fact is that it has developed a system of improving the qualifications of judges.
Very good. You're talking a little bit ago about the divisionalization with the Domestic Relations Court, and you indicated that you had gone to the legislature. Did you actually yourself go to the legislature? Did you work through a chief judge? How did that work back in those days?
No, I went myself. I went. I was chief judge here in this district at that time, and I went, and it was kind of offensive to some of the other judges because they said that we don't need it, and there are other things that we can do. And I said, no, I want to do this. I want to establish a center. And I went to the legislature, and I got the legislature to pass a joint memorial accepting the program that I was offering. And they thought that that was a fairly good idea as well. I went to the state bar. I went to the Albuquerque bar. I went to the other bars throughout the state. Corresponded with them, and I got their recognition, their support for what we were doing, because they had to go into these courtrooms where the judges were not fully prepared either, and so they were very much in support of the program, and I had it. It was very eventful, and we finally prevailed.
Now, up until then, judges heard domestic relations cases, mental health cases, criminal cases, and civil cases. Same judge heard all those.
Everything.
And so the domestic relations was the first divisionalization.
That's right. When we no, it wasn't. It was the juvenile. We were when I first started in 1960. We heard them all. Then. Within 2 or 3 years after a Supreme Court opinion that came down, it became necessary to establish a juvenile court and a juvenile holding area. So Judge Brown then became the judge of the juvenile court, and then it stayed that way for a period of time. Then it was a domestic relations. And the judges were very happy to get rid of it, of the domestic relations hearings, but by the same token, they wanted to do it on their own terms. And but I felt that we couldn't do it that way. We had to do it the way I wanted it, and we did it the way I wanted it. And we prevailed. Then a few years later. We decided to establish a criminal division, and in that regard, I had sat on a case. There was a 3-judge case here in Albuquerque. A petition was brought by I think the state bar. Or some organized lawyer unit to review the conditions of the jail. We accepted it, and I was appointed to be one of the 3 judges. And we went through the jail, and we invited inmates to come and testify, and other people, and it took about 3 weeks. For us to do that. And our conclusion was that the jail must go. And we entered an order that as of such and such a date, that no new people would be brought into the jail. They had to construct a new jail. And so I was part of the decision-making factor in building the new jail.
Tell us a little about your family.
Well, I have a very lovely family, a very loving family. My wife of now 54 years, and we have 5 children. The oldest one is in Moscow, Idaho. She's working with the Washington State University in Washington, just about 10 miles away. And she's generally in charge of the science department there, and she teaches microbiology. And then a second daughter is married to a lawyer, Jim Johansson, and she teaches middle school. She teaches science and math at St. Mary's Middle School. And then our son, Robert, he has a master's degree in political science, and he works for GAO, the Government Accountant's Office, and in Denver. He used to be in Hawaii, and his area was the Far East. Now it's in Denver, and he is handling all phases of emissions and so on, whatever that is. Anyway, is there, and then a third daughter is Catherine. She's teaching in the northern part of the state at the present time, and she's working on becoming a principal. She's got special funds to become a principal of a school. And then our fourth daughter, Linda, is a computer expert. She is absolutely a computer expert, and she works for a foundation here in Albuquerque, developing whatever. Anyway.
Well, it sounds like they all have subscribed to your father's code of either get an education or participate in manual labor.
They all did. They all recognized that. Yes.
That's good to hear. Judge, what are your primary interests and involvements outside of law?
I've always had an interest in working in the community, just volunteering in the community. And one of those sources of activity has been through Civitan International. Civitan is a service club. I participated in that for several years.
In fact, you're a founding member of this club.
Yeah, 40 years, I think, or something like that. And one of the principal things that I've done with Civitan is work with young high school kids, and we've sponsored essay contests over the years, and I've handled that for 11 or 12 years, and we put in thousands and thousands of dollars in lunches, in prizes, awards, and bonds, and so on for these kids.
The statewide project.
Mm-hmm.
And other than Civitan, do you have other interests?
Well,
I believe you're an avid fisherman, and
oh, that type of thing. Yeah, I've gotten my my grandkids to fly fish, and I tie flies. I've been doing that for many years, and I got my wife to enjoy fly fishing as well. So it's one thing about our married life. We both like to go fishing, so we go and we have lots of fun. And she catches more fish than I do, but anyway, we have lots of fun.
Other than your work with the mental health area and your work in divisionalization and the Judicial Education Center, what other areas do you believe that you've had a significant contribution to the law in?
Well, I think it's, if it's anything, it's being fair. I've always considered myself to be an old class of lawyer where I respect the law, I live in the law, and I do things and have done things in a manner in which that is recognized by the general public, and they say that's the way a judge should be.
Can you tell me how you have seen the practice of law and the legal community change during the course of your career?
You know, several years ago, we were visiting in Australia, and I made it a point to talk with lawyers there. And one of the things that they were complaining about, they were complaining that their quality of the understanding of justice is deteriorating. And it's deteriorating because of the television programs that are produced in this country on law, lawyers, judges, that are not necessarily in accordance with what they expect it should be. And I agree with that. I agree with it greatly. And I think that there has been, I'm talking with our lawyers here too, many of them, there has been a deterioration of not so much quality, but I think of respect for the law. And when a lawyer comes in and is not dressed properly, I think that's disrespect for the law. I think when the lawyer comes in and argues with the judge, I think that's disrespect for the law, and several other factors. And I think that there's a slow movement away from the understanding of my understanding of what the law should be and the court should be as it was established 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Would you like to see the courts assume more of a role in guiding the performance of lawyers? I mean, judges telling lawyers how they need to dress. I mean, what are your views on how the court should work to...
Well, I do. Now, whether or not that's a practical solution for all judges, I don't know. But in my instance, it was, because I set a dress code in my courtroom. I set a code of conduct in my courtroom, and I enforced it. And they respected that. The lawyers respected that. They knew what to expect. They respected it, and I respected them. Now, I never challenged in public. I never challenged the quality of an attorney. If there was something that was wrong, I would take them into chambers and I would say, hey, you know, this is the problem. And I would discuss it with them. But I'd never do that in public. And I always showed respect for the lawyers.
Do you have any words of wisdom to young lawyers?
One of the things that I sitting on the bench, that are two factors. When I ask the lawyers for briefs on a particular point, sometimes those lawyers are, those briefs are sub-quality. The grammar is sub-quality. And when you submit a brief, you should read it, reread it, reread it, reread it, to make sure, because if there is something that is demeaning about the quality of your paper, the judge is going to recognize that, and it doesn't do well for you. This is the thing, and I think that lawyers are going to have so most lawyers do very well. There's no question about it. Most lawyers do very well, but some of them just slip, and that should not be recognized. Now, also, this is a thing of personal taste, I realize, but then I find it difficult to follow lawyers who read their arguments and who read the questions to the witness. And I think that the lawyer should practice enough so to be able to handle that without the necessity of having to read it. I know there's a degree of confidence, and some people just are not going to do it, cannot do it. And I don't say that by way of criticism, but I think that it makes it much more effective for an attorney to present himself without the necessity of having to read.
Are there any other aspects of your career that you'd like to share with us?
The state bar has been very, very good to me over the years when I was practicing law, when I was a judge. And I've always been thankful for that. They've cooperated with me in things that I'd like to get done, and I've worked with them on many things. But the thing is that they have been very, very good to me, and I've appreciated that.
Judge, what do you believe your legacy is to the legal profession?
My legacy really is surrounded by the quality of a judge, and that quality of a judge has to be improved, not only by the judge himself but by the community, by the legal community. And we have a system at the present time, the Judicial Education Center, and I was very honored. They named the Judicial Education Center after me, the Rozier Sanchez Judicial Education Center. But it's not just the center itself, but it is the education, the training and the continued training of the judge. Because once you get your degree, that doesn't mean that you're going to be successful the rest of your life. You're going to have to continue to improve on that as time goes on. And today there is a Judicial Education Center, and it assists all phases of the judiciary, from the courts, low courts, all the way down to up to the Supreme Court, and they all have their programs, and it's all guided by the center, and all of the judges, including the Supreme Court, must comply. That's my legacy.
Let me ask you one other question. Tell us a little bit about your work as a judge pro tem in the water cases in northern New Mexico that I understand continues to today.
All I can say is I love it. It's an area where.
Let me ask you, what are the issues that you're addressing? I know you can't talk about the case, but can you tell us about the issues that you're addressing with this?
Well, there's a combined set of issues in the Northwest, and the basic issue, though, is that there's just not enough water to satisfy the needs of the people, and somewhere there's going to have to be some compromise. There's different issues which arise from that. We have several Indian tribes in the Northwest. Each of those Indian tribes have legal legal history and an application of law which is different than the application of law in general, and there are we have such a close association with other states, where the water is coming from other states, and there has to be an agreement with other states. So it's a matter of parceling out water.
Is there one case that you're handling up there, or multiple cases?
Well, you can call it one case, but each of those cases is multiple because, example, when you're adjudicating, as I was for a while, adjudicating the La Plata River, that's one case. But nonetheless, you have 4,000 applicants. And each of those applicants are considered to be a case as well. So you start one, you finish another, but it's all within the same case structure.
When you were appointed to that position as a judge pro tem, how long had that case been pending?
It was pending about 25 years before I was given the case.
And what had been the nature of the activity in the case in that 25 years?
Not very much.
What did you start doing?
When I got the case, I was not familiar with the history, so I went up to Aztec and looked at the court record, and the court record showed that there was really no application conducted by the state engineer or application by water users, and people were just using water. That's all there was. And so I asked the state engineer. I said, "How come?" And they said, "Well, they felt that their money was better used in some other issues." And we had a little confrontation, and I had a special master appointed to look into those reasons why they had not prosecuted. And I got the answer back from the special master, and at that particular point, I just told everyone in the courtroom that we're going to move, and we had to move, and we did. And
how long have you been working on that case now?
well, I've been working on that. I'm not working on that case now. There were some changes, and I'm working only on appeals at the present time from the state engineer's office. But I was working the La Plata for 8 years, and we got to about 90% of it completed. One of the things that we established, and I'm very proud of it. We have a computer system where people can call in. But I lost the thought of it. A center, a communication center, and we established that with the courts, and it's published, and everybody knows exactly what's going on in that case. But then the Supreme Court had to make some changes because it was getting too expensive. There were several water adjudications going on and each of those water adjudications had a pro tem judge. And so the Supreme Court said we have to eliminate all of those judges with the exception of one, and one judge is going to have to handle all of the adjudications in the northern part of the state. And they said under this new program, you can apply, but you need to give us a 5-year commitment. And I told him I couldn't give you a 5-year commitment on that. So they appointed somebody else to continue with the La Plata, and then I stayed with the appeals, and I'm handling appeals at the present time.
Judge, I want to thank you for taking the time to discuss with us today your background in New Mexico law, and if there's anything else that you'd like to touch on before we conclude?
Well, I'm just honored that you have asked me to do this, and that my history and so on is going to be put in the archives. To me, that's an honor in itself.
Thank you.